everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you, and we're going to talk about the Star Wars Celebration event from 2023 that was recently held at the Excel Centre in London, where several content is to be displayed over the days between April the 7th and April the 10th. So we'll cover the main announcements that were made on Friday, but just be warned that there may be spoilers, mainly for all of the Disney Star Wars era in terms of all of the movies and also the shows such as The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi. So just beware when going into this overall video, and you can check out my coverage of all of those shows so far, and I'll leave some links in the description for you. So I'll start off with, for me, the biggest news or content from Friday, and that was the first trailer for the Ahsoka live action series, which is due for release on August 2023. It would of course follow the adventures of the Jedi Padawan, who was introduced way back in the Star Wars Clone Wars animated series from 2008 as the student of Anakin Skywalker, and we saw her journey all the way through the 7 seasons of that show before appearing in her adult years, first in the Star Wars Rebels animated series from 2014, where she worked alongside the Rebel Alliance with the likes of Sabine Wren and also Ezra. And then we saw her appear in Season 2 of The Mandalorian, where she was helping Baby Yoda with his training alongside Luke Skywalker. Now the series will take place after the events of Return of the Jedi and before The Force Awakens. As with all of the previous spin-off Star Wars shows, Rosario Dawson will reprise her role in the lead character, and will also feature characters from the animated series and also the expanded universe. Now in terms of the trailer itself, I thought it was fine. It looks like it will promise much more of the Jedi lightsaber battles and the Force powers, which is what I prefer Star Wars to be. I do think Rosario still looks fantastic as Ahsoka, and it again represents the good transition of the animated characters into live action. And some of the early shots of the trailer really reminded me of the Clone Wars finale, where we see Ahsoka standing in a kind of desert barren landscape as what we saw in the finale of Clone Wars when she was paying tribute to the recent fallen soldiers within the Clone Forces. We also saw appearances of Sabine Wren, who, as mentioned before, worked alongside Ahsoka in Rebels. I wasn't quite as convinced with her look as what I have been with others, but maybe she'll look more convincing later on when we see the series. Now we did see what was surely a grown-up version of Ezra in a communication video in this shot here, so it will be interesting to see how far they develop this character in his more adult phase. We have Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who I remember recently played Huntress in the Birds of Prey movie, and she will play Hera Syndulla, who was also in the Rebel series as well, and I'm absolutely positive that we will get flashback scenes involving both Obi-Wan and especially Anakin, who of course was so integral to Ahsoka in her development during the Clone Wars saga. And I wouldn't be surprised if we also see Darth Vader again in flashback scenes, as the Star Wars franchise just can't let go of this character. Now I do understand of course that Darth Vader is still the most iconic character in all of the Star Wars franchise, but they do overuse him much like what DC does with the Joker as well. But I've always been more enthusiastic about an Ahsoka series because I do think it will have much more potential in expanding the wider universe within Star Wars. Whilst The Mandalorian, well the first 2 seasons anyway, has been solid, it really feels far more smaller in scale as what we saw with Andor as well, and I just think they're just denying the true potential in terms of storylines and characters that what we could be seeing. But Ahsoka should really open the doors to the far grander scheme on what's going on within the Star Wars universe. Now what may get hardcore fans even more excited was the inclusion of General Thrawn, who, if you know from the expanded universe, was a military leader who tries to reform segments of the Empire after the defeat by the rebellion post the events of Return of the Jedi. Now we did only see the back of his head in this shot here, and there's been no casting announcement as to who will play this role, and that gets me thinking as to whether we will actually see Thrawn at all, or whether he will just be kind of more in the background in certain scenes, because surely someone like Thrawn would be very big news, and it would be far more difficult for them to keep secret as to who will be playing the character. So we will wait and see how prominent Thrawn tends to be throughout this overall story. But so far, a decent look at the first scenes within the Ahsoka series, and I'm really hopeful that it will go on to be a standout series within the Disney Star Wars so far, especially as what we've seen recently with both the likes of Obi-Wan Kenobi, which was extremely disappointing, and also the Season 3 of Mandalorian, which has also proven to be very much of a low bar. Now we'll go on to the next announcement, which was very much of a surprise, and that was that Rey Skywalker will be returning to the franchise in a new Star Wars movie. It was confirmed that this film will be directed by Charmin Obaid Chinoy, who, if you do some looking up, was actually a former journalist and activist, and has really only had a small amount of credits in terms of films. Her most recent efforts include being involved in the Miss Marvel series, so admittedly her lack of directional experience is very concerning. Now, we're all well aware of the divisive reaction from the Disney trilogy, and that's probably understating it, but I've always felt that the best way for Star Wars to move forward was to steer well clear of the Disney trilogy by jumping forward 50 to 100 years forward after the events from that set of films and just start a fresh new slate. You don't refer to any of the characters or the First Order, you just start again from ground zero and just build from there. Now, while I didn't have a problem with Daisy Ridley in terms of her performance as Rey, it was always the way that the character was written and how her transition in terms of her Jedi powers was just poorly developed. I can only think in terms of the Jedi lineage that because she's the last established Jedi in terms of the current timeline of events, so eventually there has to be a passing of the guard or a passing of the mantle, so they will need her to be that legacy character to pass off her knowledge and her skills of the Jedi ways to the next person in line to take over. Just like what we saw with Obi-Wan in A New Hope, and what we should have done with seeing Luke in terms of The Last Jedi. Now, whether we will see the inclusion of maybe Poe Dameron or also Finn, I'm not so sure, and it'll probably be best advised if they didn't include those characters, because again, any attachment to the Disney trilogy is just going to spark off an instant backlash from fans, and that's not what they need if they want to take this franchise forward. They need to be free so they can really include much more new ideas and fresh ideas without any confirmation antagonism coming forward when the new movies are released. And speaking of new movies, we come on to the last major announcement that there will indeed be 3 new Star Wars films that will be directed by the likes of Dave Filoni, James Mangold and Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, as what I mentioned before. Now, I'm going to be very cynical here and say that I'm not so sure that we will see these actual movies come to light. If you remember from the D23 announcements way back, we were going to get Rogue Squadron, remember, being directed by Patty Jenkins. That hasn't happened. We're going to get the Star Wars Rangers of the New Republic series. That hasn't happened because of all of the fallout with Gina Carano. And a lot of the times when they have these events, what they have to do is announce that they have lots of content coming in the future. First off, to satisfy all of the people that have travelled the long distance to these events, but also in many ways to convince shareholders that Disney and Lucasfilm is on the up and up with all fresh new content to make sure that they're still worth investing in. There's no point in having all of these big events if you're not going to get anybody excited about what's to come within the future. So I really would hold off any hype at the moment in terms of getting new Star Wars movies. I think they really need to take their time in terms of a cinematic initiative, especially after what happened with the Disney trilogy. Now, whilst yes, all 3 movies did make over $1 billion each, that really was to be expected given the size of the fan base within the Star Wars franchise, and we could really argue that they kind of really should have made more money with all of the potential that was there for them. So it's very similar as to what we've seen with DC, that they really need to make sure that any cinematic movies going forward have the proper care and attention, and that they make sure this time that they please the fans and getting things right. And I really think the best way to do that is to just start afresh with new characters and not attachment either to the Disney trilogy or even to the original trilogy, because I think that's been one of the biggest problems with the Star Wars franchise as a whole, is that it's too much stuck in the past. We only need to look at the current Disney Plus shows. All of them are prequel stories in some way, shape or form. Many of them are dealing with characters that we weren't really talking about or speculating in terms of the future, or indeed we already know what happens to them, especially when we look at the likes of Andor. And that series, whatever happens, we already know his fate, given what we've seen from Rogue One. So given the fact that we're getting the Ahsoka series as well as the Acolyte series as well, I just think Star Wars needs to move forward with fresh ideas, new narratives, new characters, and that's really the best way to get the fans on side. Make them forget about the past mistakes and get them really excited about new and fresher ideas, and that gives the writers freedom as well, because they're not hindered or constrained by having to make sure everything ties up to previous established canon. That's always the best way I think you should take this forward. I think Star Trek needs to take these lessons as well. But as with the recent announcements, we will wait and see what happens going forward, but I'm really not sure that we're going to get 3 movies going forward. It's okay announcing them for now, but when you actually have to sit down away from the events and start planning and developing these ideas, it's going to take a long time, and that's maybe where reality will hit them going forward for this franchise. But hopefully, if it does happen, like I said before, it will be something fresh and new and dynamic and exciting, and hopefully get all of the Star Wars fans back on track with the franchise. Those are my overall thoughts and feelings on the recent announcements that were made from the Star Wars Celebration Day on Friday the 7th of April. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Which of the announcements excited you the most? Do you have any high hopes for the Ahsoka series? Do you think it can surpass the current Disney Plus shows that we're seeing? Or do you think it will turn out to be a further disappointment? Let me know what you think in the comments, and as usual with the previous Star Wars shows, when Ahsoka does arrive on our screens, I will provide reviews of the premiere episode, the finale episode, and also the season overall as well, so look out for that content coming in the future. Also let me know in the comments if you have any further suggestions regarding any other movies, television series, or topics within the entertainment scene that you'd like to see me cover. Let me know in the comments, and I will see if I can provide further commentary for you on those topics within the future. Please also hit the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very, very soon.